Good morning again, and thank you for joining. This is a very different, unique session. In the morning, we had some great insights from great speakers, and I felt like my IQ level just went up a few notch up. But this session is about EQ. Right?
I thought he was going to say lowering your IQ, and I'm going, well, thanks. Glad to be here, Carl.
Both. Actually, both IQ and EQ. So we have very distinguished guests here. We have Dr. Emmanuel. He is actually zoomed in from India. It's late night over there, about 11:30. So thanks for joining us. And we have Dr. Doty here. I'm going to give a quick introduction to both Dr. Doty and Dr. Emmanuel. So both of them, I've had the pleasure of having them as my friends, philosopher, and guide in my own journey of mindfulness. And I think as we are seeing a lot of more stress, anxiety at work, this topic becomes more and more important in the workplace. So Dr. Doty is a professor at the Department of Neurosurgery right here at Stanford. He has written two of the best books, and here's his book, Into the Magic Shop. And if you've not read it, I would highly recommend this. This really changed my life. A neurosurgeon's quest to discover the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. He is, we joke when we are doing our technology and engineering work, sometimes when the technology becomes very difficult, we generally say this is like brain surgery. Yeah? Here's a man who does brain surgery every day, right? So now, finally, we know that's real, right? So that's, besides the great book that really got me interested to reach out to him, he is also the founder of the Center of Compassion and Altruism Research and Education here at Stanford. This center, CCARE, is co-founded by Dr. Doty with His Highness the Dalai Lama. So it's great distinction, great recognition, great work. He's vice chair of the Charter for Compassion International, senior advisor, board of the Council of the Parliament of the World's Religion, New York Times best-selling book that we talked about, and then the Oxford, actually, I'll look it up here.
Handbook of Compassion.
Exactly.
Science.
So this is a great book, by the way. I was not aware of it. I just ordered it after you mentioned to it. So the Oxford Handbook of Compassion. So that's a great book. So that's Dr. Doty. So please give a round of applause to. Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Emmanuel Joseph. I've known him for many years, and he's kind of my guide and my teacher. And he teaches mindfulness, compassion at many Fortune 500 companies. He has written recently a book. Here, this is The Fifth Revolution. So we all heard last night from Kevin, and we heard about the fourth industrial revolution. This is about the fifth revolution. And what is that? It's reinventing workplace, happiness, health, and engagement through compassion. So it's a great book. He's a former cancer drug discovery scientist. He had some great stories about compassion. He has seen many people die right in front of him through cancer. And so he's gone through all that experience and what all the human feelings that goes through it when you, how to take all of that lessons into our, real life. So that's Dr. Emmanuel Joseph. So we're going to have, a few questions for them, but we're going to learn more from them about the journey into compassion and mindfulness. So I'll start with you, Dr. Doty.
Don't make it too hard.
So this has been a fantastic New York Times bestseller book. And this has been out there for a while, and this has become like the Bible or the handbook or textbook for compassion and mindfulness. What are the key takeaways that you've heard from your readers, and how has this been transformative in people's life, and how do you see it, the impact of the book and your thoughts and your work?
That's a simple, short answer. So let me just give a little background here that sets the stage for this, because I would assume not everyone has bought my book. Is that correct? But of course, after this, you will. Okay. So this book, which as you allude to is a New York Times bestseller, interestingly enough, it's in 41 languages now. It's a very popular book, and actually more for my children. Do any of you follow K-pop? Ever heard of BTS? Yeah, so BTS used this book as the basis for their third album.
Wow.
So that made me very popular with a subset of people here. And all of their albums are based on actually kindness, love, compassion, actually. But what this book is really about, and of course it is about neuroscience, it's about contemplative practice, but it's a story of my own journey. And so often we look at others and we think that their lives are perfect or that they have their act together. And we sit there and go, God, my life's shitty, or I don't feel so good about myself, or people are judging me, or they're going to find out about me. And I think this is the nature of being a human. And now in modern society, this issue of being good enough is even more prevalent, because social connections have broken down. We no longer are in environments where we're surrounded by family, friends, relatives, support systems, and oftentimes we come to a place where it's just us. We don't know anybody, and what do? What we do is we give a projection, like that slide of me. It says Dr. Doty's this, Dr. Doty's that. Well, that's not Dr. Doty. That's not the guy who is emotional because he lost a patient. That's not the guy who has a loved one who's dying of cancer, right? And if you present yourself to others as that, you're not really ever connecting. But that's what so many of us do. And people work in environments every day where they're never their authentic, true self, because they're in fear of being judged, not being accepted, being found out. And so what this book is about is the journey I took from childhood to present with my own issues. And I grew up actually in a difficult circumstance. My father was an alcoholic. My mother had had a stroke when I was a child. She was paralyzed, chronically depressed, attempted suicide multiple times. We were on public assistance. Neither of them had gone to college. And in that type of environment, it is highly unlikely for someone to quote unquote succeed, right? I mean, and in fact, we have something now called adverse childhood experiences. And you just click off the boxes of drug and alcohol abuse, mental illness, poverty, et cetera. And the likelihood of a child overcome that is essentially zero at some point. So what happened to me? What happened to me was I was at a point at the age of 12 where I was filled with fear, shame, anxiety, hopelessness, despair. And extraordinarily, and the reason the book is called Into the Magic Shop is that at a very difficult time, I actually walked into a magic shop. And this was before we talked about mindfulness. This was before we talked about neuroplasticity or change in your brain. And I walked into a magic shop, and there was a woman sitting there, and none of you are probably old enough, but have you heard the term Earth Mother? You have to be a certain age to know what an Earth Mother is. But there was this woman, had this gray hair, and she had glasses on the tip of her nose. She was reading a paperback, and she looked up from that, and what did she have? She had a radiant smile that was embracing and accepting. And that changed everything. And it turned out she had nothing to do with the magic shop except her son owned it, and she just happened to be sitting there while he ran an errand. But what happened, and what's critically important as an immediate lesson, is that she immediately was able to create an environment of what we call psychological safety. What does that embrace? Authenticity. Be non-judgmental. Looking at the other as an equal, not down on them. And for somebody my age, that didn't happen very often, if at all. And the other thing she did was she started asking me questions, penetrating questions, which normally I would have been ashamed to ever answer. And I answered them. And at the end of this conversation, she said to me, she said, you know, I really like you. I'm here for another 6 weeks. If you show up every day, I think I could teach you something that could really change your life. Now, how many of us get that type of an offer? But the extraordinary thing is, it is within each of us this capacity to change another person's life. And sometimes it's just saying hello. Sometimes it's opening a door. Sometimes it's stopping and being present for them. And so what happened over the 6-week period, and you know, I have to tell you, as a 12-year-old, I showed up not because I had any self-awareness or insight. I showed up for basically 2 reasons. I had absolutely nothing else to do, and she was giving me cookies. and that was it. But what she taught me in this period of time was, one, the fact that I held all this stress and anxiety. You know, if you're a fish swimming in dirty water, you're not aware of the water, are you? And so she made me realize that I was tense, and more importantly, that I could not attend. Because when you're in the environment I grew up in, it's a form of trauma, constant trauma, chaos. And then ultimately you have post-traumatic stress disorder. So you're always looking around. So she taught me how to do a body survey, which is what we call it now, and to attend, to do a breathing exercise, which is the fundamental core of mindfulness. And this is before Jon Kabat-Zinn, but this was an intuitive technique she had learned because she had studied Eastern philosophy. And so after that, suddenly, I was sitting up straight. I was able to look at her. And then the 2 other critical components that I think oftentimes are missing in a lot of the practices that are talked about is she taught me what is now termed self-compassion. You see, how many people in this room, as an example, even today, still sit there and say, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, they're going to find me out, and have this negative self-dialogue? How many people in this room? Come on. If you're not raising your hand, you're delusional, okay? And this is the nature of our humanity. But the key is that she also taught me, from understanding that negative dialogue, because your body has a response when you say negative things to yourself, is to how to change that dialogue and be self-affirming, to say it's okay, that with all of my faults, I'm still worthy of love, and that I should be able to accept love. I mean, how many in this room still have a hard time taking a compliment from somebody? Right? Yeah, you're great. You're fantastic. Look at what you do, how you affect the world, how you present yourself. You deserve all the compliments in the world, yet you still have a hard time taking a compliment. So she taught me how to be more self-affirming, to understand this negative dialogue was not me. It was a construct that wasn't real. It was a construct because our nature as humans is to have negative stuff stick to us. You know, I had a lady recently, I gave a talk, and she asked a question, but I was talking about this negative self-dialogue and how this stuff sticks with you. And she said, you know, when I was a kid, and this is a woman who's a nurse, PhD, runs a large healthcare entity. She said, when I was growing up, my father said to me, I would never be anything. And her whole life has been spent trying to prove abroad. How horrible. Versus what a positive word will do. You know, you're absolutely fantastic. I'm so lucky that you're my child. You could do incredible things. I can't wait to see what you will do. Look at her whole life, because her whole life has been spent suffering, right? Because she carries this on her back every day that she's not worthy. But if you change that, and this is also the power of words, which we don't appreciate. You know, we say an offhand comment we don't think is important, but in the right context, it has a profound negative effect on a person. So words are important. So she taught me to change the dialogue. And the other thing that happened when I changed the dialogue is that I saw the world differently suddenly, because when you always are beating yourself up, it's hard for you to see that others are suffering. So when I was able to be more kind to myself, I was able to be more kind to others and recognize that everyone is suffering and that we're connected. And the other critical aspect was, too, that really changed things was I used to believe that events were positive or negative. That if something happened, I would sit there and go, it's their fault, I hate them, or, this happened and it's bad. But the reality is these events have nothing. We give them power. And so as a child, with my parents, I was saying, my parents don't love me, and, this happened, and I would blame, or I would say it was my fault. And what I realized ultimately was, as an example with my parents, their actions were because they didn't have the tools to deal with their own pain and suffering, right? Because a lot of people's actions have nothing to do even with you, yet they may impact you. And this is why it's important also to be gentle to others and understand that they're suffering. So reframing, being self-compassionate, looking at the world through a compassionate lens, that changes everything. And what's interesting is you guys are in the business environment, but whether it's in the educational environment, business environment, or healthcare, we are having a crisis of stress, anxiety, hopelessness, loneliness. I gave a talk to the business school at a major university, and I asked the group of people in this executive MBA program, I said, how many of you had a problem in your home life or something that struck you that was profoundly painful, hurtful, or that you were having trouble dealing with? How many people raised their hand, you think? 100% of people. Yeah. That they had something happen in the last several years that was very challenging for them. And I said, how many people felt that your company was supportive of you? Do you think it was 100% of people?
Nope.
One person. One person out of about 150 people. And I said, well, that's interesting. Tell me about your company. He said, well, my uncle owns it. Well, that's why they were sensitive to his needs. But my point is that some of the practices we're going to talk about, one of the reasons we're actually talking about this Meta-Mindful University, are extraordinarily powerful to be able to change that narrative, to give you a tool set that allows you to be compassionate to yourself, compassionate to others, give you tools to allow you to be resilient, and to sort of reframe things. And if you're able to do that, that changes everything. And we've seen it over and over again. There are a variety of studies now that show when you imbue these practices authentically, and that's the key, it changes everything in terms of increasing creativity, increasing productivity, increasing, shockingly, being happy at work. And so I think that's there. Now, I don't want to get wrong. To imply, though, that if you live or work in an absolutely toxic environment, that doing this will magically make everything better. Yeah. It will not. It may allow you to be there a little bit longer, but if you're in that environment and they cannot give you the tools that are necessary to allow you to thrive, then you should leave. So, thank you. I think I've said enough for now.
Right. So thank you, Dr. Doty. That was very insightful, and sharing your personal story. That's very inspiring. I have a question for you more into the actual science part of the brain, but I'll come back to that right after a question to Dr. Emmanuel. So we have you, Dr. Emmanuel. Thanks for joining from India. So tell us a little more about the inspiration for the book, The Fifth Revolution, and some of the learnings that you've had by practicing compassion, mindfulness in the workplace. You've done workshops with many Fortune 500 companies, so this audience can benefit from your experience.
Carl, thank you so much for organizing this. I hope everyone can hear me from there. Thank you for organizing and putting this platform together. And Dr. Doty, always a pleasure to be in the midst of your wisdom. So The Fifth Revolution is essentially a book about workplace compassion. And my contention in the book is that if we can create a work culture of compassion, we would have created a workplace that is engaged, that's happy and healthy. And one of the questions I keep getting asked is, why do we want to call it as the fifth revolution? 3 industrial revolutions are done, and we are in the middle of the 4th industrial revolution. But when we talk about industrial revolutions, we're always thinking about products and processes. But what we forget is all of these industrial revolutions were motivated by human suffering. And all of these products and processes were an effort to alleviate that suffering in some way and to increase that quality of life experience in some way. But the truth is, none of these products and processes and the industrial revolutions have actually managed to address the human suffering that was the motivation for their creation. And I'm saying that because if you think of a person in the 16th century, and if you look at the level of stress or how stressed he would have felt at that time, and I'm just making an assumption here, and how stressed a person in our current generation feels, I would believe that we are no better. And I don't believe that our happiness levels have dramatically shifted because of all the different resources that we have brought into our life. So I believe that, well, while digitalization and the virtual real world that we are creating with the fourth industrial revolution are all wonderful, I think we need to also step back and realize that in addition to creating more resources, we need to step back a little and ask what is it that we can do about ourselves, our inner world, the way we interface with what the world is offering us to create more happiness, to create a higher quality of life experience. So that is what I call as the fifth industrial revolution, which is the revolution of the human spirit or human conscience. And I'm specifically focusing on workplaces as a target because that is where we spend the best of our life and the best of our waking hours. And if we can create a culture of happiness and kindness, we would automatically be able to translate that into a happier and a kinder world outside of the workplace. So what I've done in this book is essentially talk about 9 very simple life hacks that we always believed in and knew, which basically create an umbrella of what compassion in workplaces can look like. Self-compassion, people-first thinking, abundance mindset, mindfulness, embracing oneness, communicating with compassion, vulnerability, big picture thinking, and practicing gratitude. And these small things, as they come together and under that umbrella of compassion, can completely shift the way we interface with ourselves and with the people around us. And in small ways, a revolution is created by a million different minds coming together, and each of those million different minds has to undergo an internal transformation, which is what this book is a call for.
Great, thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. So, by the way, this topic is actually very timely because tomorrow is the World Kindness Day. So it's a good reminder to practice kindness and compassion. So I have a question more on the brain science, since you are a neurosurgeon.
I hope I can answer.
So this is my personal feeling that I think that it seems like in our brain we have a default setting of being just dissatisfied about whatever we do, whatever we accomplish. No matter how much we accomplish, there is this level of dissatisfaction. There is this feeling of inadequacy. There's a feeling of this lack that we lack this, we lack that. No matter how good your personal life gets, your work life gets, but there is that dissatisfaction. Now it could be a positive force to kind of make you do better, but it is also a damaging and negative force, because you don't want to just, no matter how much you're accomplishing, you don't want to just live a life with dissatisfaction. And I am very open to share that I live that life personally, right? And that led me
I thought you read my book.
No,
Jesus Christ.
of course, but that led me actually to you and to Dr. Emmanuel to learn from you guys as the masters. And I thought, let me just bring it out, my own personal story here, and if everybody can benefit.
Sure. So what's the question?
Is there a default setting in the brain that we are just not satisfied? And how?
Actually, I think that's probably a construct that is more in modern society. And the reason I say that is that if we look at these places called, do you guys know what blue zones are? They're these places in the world where people routinely live to be over 100. Well, these are places basically you've grown up with siblings, parents, grandparents, everybody's in close proximity. And the thing about it is, though, that when you grow up in that type of an environment, you're not bombarded with a world that tells you you're not good enough or you're not smart enough. You know, it's like the media selling to third world countries that they should come to America to engage in conspicuous consumption, right? You buy a false narrative. You know, these people come from places where they have some of the greatest wisdom traditions, and they're actually happy to come here under the false notion that if you acquire more stuff, you're going to somehow be happy. And I think that the problem is when we get into these environments, instead of being able to be with people who, if you will, in terms of what you have, are pretty close to equal, you have people who have whole different variations in what they've been able to accomplish or what they have. And then this creates a feeling of worthlessness or that you're not good enough or you have to compete. Now, I'm not a Buddhist, but certainly there are certain principles in Buddhist philosophy that I think can be very helpful. And also that cause suffering. What are the things that cause suffering? One is ego. 2 is attachment, right? 3 is craving, right? And these are invariably the things that all of us must deal with. You know, if you're always craving for more, and then when you get the more, what happens magically? You realize the more is nothing. As an example, and I'll go through this very quickly, I ended up, through my path, nominally becoming very successful, right? I went to college, medical school, became a neurosurgeon, got into med school, got into a very competitive residency, then was a professor here, and then was a successful entrepreneur. And here I have a penthouse in San Francisco. I have Ferraris, Porsches, I have a jet. I was single at the time. I was having what I thought were wonderful times. I won't go into more detail. But you know what? I wasn't. And every day I would go home in the evening and I was saying, God, and I had all my friends going, Jim, you have everything. This is great, you know, da-da-da. And I was more miserable than I had ever been in my entire life because I kept striving for these things that I thought then people would look at me and go, oh, well, he's okay. He's successful. Yet deep down, I was still the same child going, I'm scared. I don't have enough. I want people to like me, right, and accept me. And that's the creation of suffering. And what happened was I ended up, through the dot-com thing, in 6 weeks, losing about $80 million, being $3 million in the hole. And of course, who becomes your best friend at that time is your banker. And anyway, I lost everything. And I went through a very deep exercise about who I was, who I thought I was, what had happened to me, and trying to understand the depth of my own unhappiness. And I realized that all the things I was chasing were not what creates success. And ultimately, I was in a position where I had made some obligations to charity. I had been CEO of a company that had yet to go public. I had no assets left, but I wanted to live up to these charitable obligations after this period of reflection. So I asked my friends what I should do. And the stock that I had left had been obligated to these charitable things, but my attorney called me and said they had not filed the paperwork by mistake. So I didn't have to give anything to charity, nothing. And I could take all those assets back, and I decided not to. I let it go. And that ended up being tens and tens of millions of dollars. But it gave me an incredible gift. Because on the one hand, I had everything, but then had nothing. On the other hand, I had nothing, but I gained everything. What was the everything that I had gained? It was to be of service, right? Because that's what defines us. What we want in our lives is meaning. Meaning comes through authentic connection. It comes through generosity. It comes from unconditional love. And when you can live a life that is centered on that and not striving for these things and have an internal awareness of what it means to live a life, that's when you reach self-actualization, and that's when you reach transcendence. In a nutshell.
That's great. That was very helpful. So one final question, and then we're gonna do actually a practice here. So we're gonna do a meditation practice. So Dr. Emmanuel, we got together with Dr. Doty and talked about, the importance of workplace compassion and mindfulness. So, you have done this with many, many large companies. So how do you think of bringing all this wisdom and practices into the workplace? And I have, the three objectives of M3. So we came together and put together what we call a meta mindfulness that would enable three things that I think Dr. Emmanuel can explain better than me.
Certainly, Carl. Thank you. And again, it's there are no accidents, I believe, and it's a wonderful thing that all three of us have managed to bring this to fruition. So one of the realizations, the challenges that we face with transformation is that human transformation by itself is pretty challenging. But human transformation at scale is even more challenging. So technology can support scale learning, but for real transformation to happen, we need to strategically pair technology with live and experiential training. And I think this is the beauty of what we are attempting to do with meta mindfulness, that we have a fantastic platform through EdCast, the Spark platform, on which we are creating a community of like-minded individuals. And I'll share that Spark platform here. Can you see the slide, the screen? Hopefully you're able to see the screen that I'm sharing. So this is the Spark platform that EdCast has created. And what we are trying to do here with this is creating learning pathways and journeys and smart cards. And also in addition to this, create live training experiences, live webinars and on-demand webinars. But that's the beauty, again, with pairing this technology with live training and online training and on-site experiences and leadership retreats. So the objective is not just a platform where people will come and learn something, but actually experientially create transformation. And this is kind of what we summarize here in this website. You can visit our website at metamindfulness.org. So we have a curated community, we have wisdom workshops and transformational retreats. And Carl, do you want to expand on all of some of these different components?
Yeah, well, we are running out of time, so we want to finish our practice here because that's very important, and then we will have later in the day we'll share more information. So thanks, Dr. Emmanuel. So I would request Dr. Doty that we're talking about mindfulness. We would love to have some guided meditation with you.
Sure. How many of you meditate? How many of you find it hard to meditate? It shouldn't be that hard. So it's not something that you should create more angst to learn how to meditate. What I'd like to do in this quick exercise, though, is because, there are a lot of different guided exercises like this, but what I'd like to focus on, how many of you are fans of the Dalai Lama? For some people, he is an icon of compassion, but one of the things he says is that the greatest source of love often is from one's mother. And interestingly enough, I'd like to share a practice with you that I do because it reminds you of the power of that deep love. And that when you're bathing in that, it actually puts you in the mode actually where you should live. Because there's no further anxiety, you're unconditionally accepted. So I think that's what we're going to do. So for those of you who have meditated, don't get stressed. Why don't we just relax? Now, people will often say, make your legs straight. My legs are so long, they are crossed. So forgive me if I did not fulfill that tenet of mindfulness. And see, this is where people get locked up in. So I'd just like you to relax and get in a position that feels comfortable. Try to keep your back straight. And sort of start breathing in and out. And just try to relax. And again, so often we'll sit and say, think about your legs becoming relaxed and over and think about that, and you feel that they're getting heavy as they become more relaxed, and your arms are relaxed, and your chest is relaxed, and you're slowly breathing in and out, focusing on your breath, and just feeling it come into your nostrils, and then slowly releasing it as your body becomes more and more relaxed. And the stress, the anxiety, the worry is leaving you as you slowly breathe in and breathe out and become more and more relaxed. You have no worries. You're just thinking about floating as your body becomes more and more relaxed. And you're slowly breathing in and then releasing that breath as you become more and more relaxed. And I'd like you to think about that person in your life, your mother, your father, a friend, who has been there for you when you felt alone, when you felt anxious, when you've been suffering. And what is that feeling like when that person embraces you, holds you, and gives you unconditional love? And when you're embraced by that feeling, feel the warmth of your entire body and the sense that you're safe, that you have no worries, and that you're loved. As you slowly breathe in and breathe out and feel that warmth. You're not being judged. You're simply accepted for who you are, and you're worthy of that love. As you slowly breathe in and breathe out, and you're beginning to feel this lightness of your spirit, because you don't have to have any projection of what you want people to think you are. You are simply who you are. As you slowly breathe in and breathe out, feeling more and more relaxed, and you feel a lightness about you, a feeling of warmth as you're embraced by unconditional love. And you're so relaxed. And you feel better than you have felt in so long, because you can simply be you as you slowly take in and release your breath. And just sit with that feeling for a moment. As you slowly breathe in and breathe out, you have no worries, and you feel so good, better than you have felt, because you feel warmth, you feel love. Now let's slowly open our eyes, staying relaxed. I don't want to wake up. I just want to sit there like that. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Appreciate it very much. Amazing. Thank you, sir.